How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast. Brendon and Sterling coming at you live on this Saturday. What would you say? Afternoon? We're starting to get to the early stages of the afternoon. College football back
Yeah,
into our lives, and it's a great day to be a sports fan, particularly a football fan, as everything gets going. Obviously, we are in the bye week of the preseason before. So we're just kind of getting ready for the NFL season. Every team is now down to their 53-man roster, and as we were just doing kind of our pre-podcast kind of talk, we were talking about someone that may be a little bit surprising to us on each of our teams. Obviously, me being a Chicago Bears fan, as you can see in the background, you being a Steelers fan, as you can see in the background, and just kind of Sterling, maybe take us through one of the guys that you were shocked at didn't make the 53-man roster for your Pittsburgh Steelers.
yeah. We had a lot of tough decisions this year. There were a lot of good guys. Um, but honestly, the one that surprised me the most was the fact that they dropped Zach Gentry off of the 53-man roster, and they're going to roll with just the two tight ends.
So they're
Which,
going with Fryermuth and Washington.
yeah, which wouldn't surprise me as much if, say, they had kept Derek Watt in at fullback, and then we could still use Connor Hayward, at both fullback and tight end. But Derek Watt is no longer there either, and so Hayward is purely our fullback now, and just feels strange running with only a two tight end set, especially with how useful Zach Gentry's been over the last few seasons. Like, granted, he's not an every down guy. He's not going to get you big chunk plays all the time, but he was always a good, hidden weapon that teams seem to forget about when you needed a big, third and long surprise chunk play out of him or something.
Well, and one of the reasons why I'm actually a little bit surprised that they are only rocking with the two tight ends here at the moment is Pat Fryermuth is a great tight end, like arguably
Hmm.
top 10 in the NFL. But the one big knock on him is that he's injury prone. And so, yeah, you have Darnell Washington, but Darnell Washington coming out of Georgia, he was definitely used as more of like an extra O lineman with upside in catching. And so, if you look at, for instance, if Pat Fryermuth happens to go down, which we've seen in the past,
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure in his rookie season he was dropped twice with concussion. So that's just not something that you ever want to see. Darnell Washington, with still being a second round pick, and he has upside receiving, you're gonna realistically put him out there not as a receiver, but as that sixth offensive lineman essentially. And so that's kind of one of those moves I just look at. I go, if one of your guys goes down, let's just say it is Washington that goes down. Well, you still have Pat
Hmm.
Fryermuth, but you still need an extra guy out there because every team out there in the league has two, three tight end sets, and so gonna be really interesting to see what kind of happens there. Likely they're probably gonna sign someone just to add to the team, but yeah, really interesting to
Well,
see that Gentry's gone.
I think it's possible too. They may add him to the practice squad. I know they've been doing some contract restructuring right now through a couple of the players just to try and get enough of that cap room to fill the practice squad. So it's very possible he lands there. But yeah, just strange to not see him going into week one on the 53-man roster. And yeah, I mean, if they don't manage to get him, if somebody scoops up Gentry, then who else are they going to go out and find to fill that hole if we do have a bad injury in that position? Luckily with Fryermuth, it, I mean, luckily, unluckily, it was concussions were the problem. So it's not like it's a shoulder or a knee or anything like that where any given play it could give out. If he's in there blocking more and if he's been working on that, you don't really see concussions very often when the players are blocking. It's
Yep.
usually when they take a hit after making a catch. And that was both of Fryermuth's concussions were, big hits to the head after making a catch, which is surprising with, how big of a guy he is, how are guys even hitting him in the head.
Well, yeah, and I remember Fryermuth coming out of Penn State, and he was part of the year where Kyle Pitts was the number one tight end in the draft class, and it was like, okay, Kyle Pitts is the guy, and then it was all the way back behind. It was okay, it's Pat Fryermuth. Like any other draft, he would have been the first tight end selected, and it's not like he's this just guy that just ultimately got lucky. Like, he's a second round pick for a reason. He was a quality tight end. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Again, knock on wood, we never want any player to get injured, even if they're injury prone or, a rival of our team. We want all players to be healthy and safe. And so, yeah, just hopefully good fortunes for him going forward. And it just feels like they can't just run a two tight end set or two tight ends on the roster. Feels
Right.
like they
I
got
think
to
it's
make a
just
move.
that they wanted to keep a couple extra offensive linemen. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe some of these O linemen are going to play that tight end 3 spot and essentially just be a sixth lineman instead. They're never going to go out for a pass. It's just going to be, yeah, you're there to help protect Kenny Pickett because he's young, he's dynamic. We want to keep him healthy. We don't want one of these second year injuries that then is going to plague him for the remainder of his career.
Exactly, and even then, having your more athletic tight ends, having them like showing them of like, okay, or not tight ends, more offensive linemen, having them
Hmm.
show like, oh hey, like he's out there, so it's clearly a blocking play. Then you can have that design maybe a few weeks into the season of like, oh hey, he just does a 5 route or 5 yards deep in route and just catches the ball, gets down. It's like, oh shit, we actually have to watch this guy now, and so that could
Yeah.
be a potential
So,
thing.
and that is very possible with Matt Canada's offense as well. We did see in training camp and stuff, there were a few days where they had O lineman. I think was it was it Kendrick Green who they just traded, so it doesn't matter. But they had him rolling at fullback a couple of times, which was strange to see an O lineman, sitting in there as a fullback and getting the ball. So I
I'm
mean
actually
that doesn't
surprised that
matter
we
because
don't see that more often. To have like a
I
backup O lineman who, like, I would look at it as a backup O lineman who's really athletic, because O linemen
yeah.
today are a lot more athletic than what they were. But I look at it, I go, if, for instance, the Bears had a really athletic O lineman, you know, 300 pounds, 6'4", around that, if he can move, that, like, to me that just shows, I go like, yeah, why not have him back there? Because obviously the fullback's main role is to kind of open up
Mhm.
that little bit of extra space that the old line might not open, and I'm surprised we actually don't see that as often.
Well, I think what it is most of your O linemen with a fullback, what you want is that quick front first step. Most O linemen have that quick back step,
True.
because they're always dropping back into the pass protection for the most part, and so you don't see a lot of O linemen that are really quick getting forward right away, and so that might be why we don't see it too often. But yeah, that would be a really unique play to try and pull out. And who knows, maybe Matt Canada's got something like that planned since he was testing it out with Kendrick Green in training camp there. So,
Just imagine Quentin Nelson playing as a fullback. Like, he's already
right?
a nasty motherfucker as it is, but just imagine him lining up there in front of Jonathan Taylor, just going
Hmm.
like, okay, I'm just gonna knock a dude's head off and just let JT go down. Obviously, JT on the 4 game kind of IR, just pup list, I guess. I'm not
Yeah.
exact. I can't remember. Is it pup list? Is what he's on?
Yeah, it's the unable to perform.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
dumb because he's definitely able to perform. But regardless,
I think it's just them trying to keep him healthy while he seeks out a trade.
well, they've already said, they said, if you don't find yourself a trade going into the regular season, we're not trading you.
Yeah.
Which that could be all changed come mid-season, come trade deadline day, which is a
Hmm.
very big possibility. But yeah,
And so we covered the Steelers in that surprise cut. What about your Bears? Was there anybody in the cut list that didn't make the 53-man roster that surprised you a little?
there was a couple of guys, but I think the biggest one that I saw was Terrell Lewis, who was an edge rusher for the team. He came over from the Rams over on waivers near the end of the year last year. And I remember Terrell Lewis coming out of Alabama as an edge rusher. It was kind of, he was one of those guys where when he was drafted in the 3rd round, it was, this dude has the ability to be a dominant edge rusher. The big knock on him was his ability to stay healthy. At Alabama, he had injury issues. Getting to the NFL, those injury issues continued, so the Rams cut him, went on waivers. Chicago signed him last year because they had nothing. Performed really, really well in, I think it was the 2 games that he played. I'm not sure. It wasn't a lot of games that he actually played for the Bears last season, but what he did, it was good. And then once we got to the actual preseason, he was lighting it up, and it was one of those things where I was like, okay, the Bears again, they're still kind of struggling in that edge rusher department, but when you have guys that are showing bright spots, it's really difficult and hard to not keep those guys who are showing out. And ultimately, we cut him and we didn't bring him back on the practice squad. And then we signed a guy off of waivers who had arguably worse stats throughout his career in the NFL. And I'm sitting back going, why would we bring this guy in and cut this guy who's established in the system? He's young, and he, if he can stay healthy, he has that promise, and he's only going to come in to be a rotational guy. So I was baffled, and a bunch of my fellow Chicago Bears content creators, we are in that little group text, and we were all sitting there going, what the hell? Like, we were just all baffled at the decision.
Yeah, there must have been something behind the scenes maybe for something like that to go down where maybe he just wasn't a good fit personality wise with the rest of the edge rushers,
Yeah, it.
and wanted more snaps than he was going to be getting, and maybe the coaching staff and the GM just looked at that and went, this could cause more problems than upside.
Yeah, I maybe it has that sort of feeling, but I know why we cut Travis Gibson. Edge rusher. 2 years ago, he had 7 sacks, and then last year, I think he only got like three, if that. So we just had a massive drop off from that season, and the Bears cut him, and it wasn't necessarily the biggest shock, but it was still one of those things of going like, you've had this guy who's been on the team for years, knows the defense at this point, and he has the potential to go for 7 sacks, and we're just kind of hoping last year was a bad year for him. And then, Ryan Poles, our general manager, went out and stated, like, listen, we love the kid. It's just we think he's better suited to be outside linebacker in a 3-4 as opposed to what the Bears are running in a 4-3. And they just didn't think he was,
Mhm.
the proper fit for a 4-3 defense, which is totally acceptable. He found his way over to Tennessee. And so, yeah, those two guys were kind of the big shocks for me of like, okay, like I was a little bit shocked at that just because of how poor the actual edge rushing room already was. So it's weird to see guys that had promise and showed out in the preseason that they just wouldn't continue on, if you know what I mean.
Yep. Yeah, definitely get what you're saying there, but it's always tough making that 53-man roster,
It
man.
is.
There's always guys that go out that you're like, why would you get rid of him? But I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see if he lands anywhere. We'll see how that D line for your Bears do to start the season here.
Yeah, and on the counter note, was there any guys that went into the offseason that you might have not expected to make the 53-man roster, but you're happy to see that they did?
Not really. There weren't many surprises for my Steelers this year, to be completely honest with you. Like everybody we had going in, like we made trades at the start of the season. We got Patrick Peterson. We got the holes filled that we needed, and everybody going in, it was all sort of expected. I feel like, and this was the most drama-free training camp I've endured in like a decade. And so it's been nice to see, everybody's been on the same page, everything's been going exactly as planned. It's looking like the Steelers are ready to play week 1 as opposed to years past where they're like, okay, we're ready to think about what we're going to look like starting in week 1. They already have their identity sort of nailed down. They know what they want to do. And yeah, none of it really surprised me, honestly.
Yeah, I would say the guy that I was really hopeful to make the roster when I saw him. He was an undrafted free agent quarterback, a Div 2 guy, Taysom Bagent, led and broke, and he holds a ton of records as a quarterback from Div 2. And I think in Div 2 he had, over the 4 years that he played, 150 plus passing touchdowns, which at any level, like that's still massively impressive. And so I was super jacked up to see him make the team, and he played so well in the preseason, enough to the point where PJ Walker, who was signed on to be our number 2 QB as our backup, they said, get out. Like, no, you are not as good as the undrafted rookie kid. And Bajent is now QB number 2, and it was weird to kind of go into this offseason going like, okay, we have a quarterback battle, but it's for the QB2 spot. And as a Chicago Bears fan who has always been like, we don't know what the hell our quarterback situation is like, to go, well, we know who number 1 is. Let's have a battle to see who number 2 is. That was a really fun, unique thing that I think most Bears fans were kind of looking at, going like, this is nice.
Right. Yeah, it's nice to actually have your first stringer set and be looking at the battle for number 2 instead. You know, that was a nice thing for me this year too, because last year was like that first year in a long time where it was questionable who the starter was, who the second string was, who third was. You know, this year first was set. We knew it was Kenny Pickett, and it was there's still a lot of arguments going on in a lot of the Steelers forums and stuff about, you know, who's number 2. Is it Rudolph or is it Trubisky? You know, people going back and forth constantly. So that's still funny to see, but I don't think that's going to affect the locker room at all.
No, and honestly, the locker room will never be affected on who your number 2 quarterback is. If that's the battle, then most of the time people are like, yeah, sure, have the guys battle for this. But if they're getting pissy with each other, it's like, okay, settle your shit. But yeah, is it gonna
Yeah.
be Mitch the Bitch, or is it gonna be Christmas Rudolph?
Um, I I don't even know if they've decided yet.
Mm.
Like myself, I would go with Rudolph. I would go with Rudolph as your number 2 and utilize Trubisky the same way that the Bills did, as almost like an extra quarterbacks coach at this point.
Which, honestly, for him is probably where he's going to end up being. He's likely
Yeah.
going to be a quarterback coach either in college or the NFL, or hell, even both, just because
Yeah.
he has that knowledge, and it's just one of those things. He was always a smart guy. It's just that
Hmm. He
his
couldn't handle the pressure.
well, he couldn't handle the pressure, and his God-given abilities weren't, they just failed him.
Yeah.
You watch Tony Romo. He was arguably one of the smartest quarterbacks in the NFL. You listen to him do his commentary and you're like, Jesus Christ, like this guy
Hmm.
knows everything. And all that tells me is that his physical abilities just weren't able to compete with his brains. And Trubisky has a lot of really great physical abilities. He's super mobile, super athletic, and he has a howitzer for an arm. Like, he has a really, really strong arm. It's just,
Yeah.
it feels like
It
some,
feels like reaction time. Like
it does.
the reaction time's not quite there, and so that, you know, both of them, they make those decisions a little too quickly before realizing, oh wait, there's 3 guys there that I just threw the ball to.
Yeah, it's going. I have a guy open. I'm gonna throw there. Oh no, the entire defense is there.
Exactly. I think Trubisky has started to resign himself to that fact as well. The fact that he was willing to restructure his contract completely this year, and I think he's taken like $8 million a year less to stay with the Pittsburgh Steelers, knowing he's not going to be the starter, you know, unless something, you know, cataclysmic happens and they have to throw him in there, which, you know, I, if it
He's a
happens, it
dude who's
happens.
started a lot of games and has won a
Yep.
lot of games. I don't like using win loss as a quarterback
No.
metric, but again, you look at his win loss ratio. He does have a lot of wins. He has a lot of starts, so it's one of those things going. You could do a lot worse. You could have
Yeah.
Nathan
But
Peterman in there.
exactly. Yeah, and he said he wanted to stay there and he wanted to be like a sounding board for Kenny Pickett. He wanted to be there to help him grow and develop. So that I have no problem with that, because, you know, that knowledge and that intelligence from Trubisky, that's not going to affect Kenny Pickett's reaction time. If anything, it's going to help him start seeing some things on the field maybe he hasn't seen yet, and hopefully just develop him further, and who knows, maybe propel him from that top 15 quarterback that I'm thinking this year to maybe even having a super breakout year and getting into the top 10.
Maybe it's just really going to be a matter of time. But now moving into kind of taking a look here at week 1, Thursday, September 7th, getting oh so mightily close. That is next week. And
Yep.
the Detroit Lions take on the Kansas City Chiefs. I know in the last time that we did the podcast, we we ultimately talked about this game to you verbatim. But going into week one, what are some games other than your Pittsburgh Steelers that you are really looking at going like, I need to watch this game because it is going to be fun to watch?
Well, I probably won't be watching it other than during commercial breaks, but Bengals Browns is one I definitely want to be seeing because obviously division rivals. I want to see what both these teams look like. I'm curious to know what the Browns are going to be putting on the field and if they're going to look like an actual team or if it's just going to be the same usual dumpster fire it always is. Other than that, I am interested to see your Bears take on the Packers because this is a big game for Justin Fields and the Bears, man. Like, you guys have to win this game at home against the Green Bay Packers with no Favre, no Rodgers. It's a new quarterback. Like, if if you guys let Jordan Love come in there and beat you up, then I think that completely lets the air out of the tires on your whole season. Like,
Well,
you guys have to make a statement in this game. So that is a really, really big game that I think is going to be exciting.
I
And
wrote an
then,
article jumping into that yesterday,
yeah.
and where I said there's three games on the Chicago Bears schedules that are must wins, and they are the most important. And for me, the most important game is this Week One game against the Green Bay Packers. Yes, if you win or lose week one, does that mean you're a Super Bowl champion? No. It does. Like, if you lose in week one, it doesn't mean that you won't be able to have greatness in that year. But I totally agree. If Jordan Love comes into Soldier Field and just picks up where Aaron Rodgers left up or where he left off, it's going to be one of those things where the entirety of the year doesn't matter
Hmm.
if the Bears go 6-1 after that game and look like unbeatable things. It's going to be, well, the Packers still own you. Like
Yep.
you like, well, I don't know, this Jordan Love guy, there's always going to be that. And the Bears, if Jordan Love plays great, you have to beat him. If he plays bad, you have to beat him. This is one of the most important Chicago Bears games of the entire year, just for a
Hmm.
lot of reasons of what you're saying, and it is just it
It,
has to be a must win.
it is, and for Justin Fields, not just the Bears. Like, Justin Fields has to go out there and outperform Jordan Love.
He does.
He's got so many more weapons now. The offensive playmakers, it's stacked there. Between DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, Darnell Mooney. You just re-signed Cole Kmet to an extension. You got Khalil Herbert in the backfield. Like, there is no excuse this year. The O line is looking better than it was last year as well. Like, this is big.
Mhm.
Like, the changing of the guard for them. Are you able to compete with the Packers now, or is it going to be another decade of being in the rearview mirror looking at the Packers? You know?
And that's just such a terrifying thing because unfortunately for you, your team has been good for so many years to this point, and you've never really been on the opposite side of having a team that is just going to be blowing you out for years and years. Because again, you had the Ben Roethlisberger, and most of your
Um,
team's rivalries have been kind of split most of the time.
they have. I mean, I did experience a lot of that with Tom Brady and the Patriots.
I'm more
You got to
thinking like
remember that.
divisional rivalry type thing of
Yeah,
like the guys that
yeah,
you have to
but
see twice a year. But no,
exactly.
I know what you mean for like the Tom Brady, and then
Hmm.
you got to throw Peyton Manning in there as well because Peyton was still always a thorn in the side of the team. But
Yeah.
yeah, it really for the longest time for you guys, it was Peyton, Roethlisberger, and Brady. Those were the three guys. I think they went, what was it, like 16 years in a row of at least one of those guys in the AFC Championship game,
Yeah.
which is insane to think about.
Right. It is insane, but I mean, like, I'm hoping for some more success this year because, as much as we talk about how my team, hasn't had a losing season and we always look good, we're always competitive. It's been like 5 or 6 years since we won a playoff game. It's been something like 10 or 11 years since we were in an AFC championship game. And it's been we're getting close to 20 years since we won a championship now. It's about 15 years. So it's been a while. I'm ready to win another Super Bowl at this point. I'm tired of watching other teams play that last game of the year.
Yeah, me too. Me too, buddy. Me too.
right?
Fuck you.
But other than those two games, the other one I'm interested in, I'm not going to get to watch it unfortunately because I'll be at work. It's that Monday nighter between the Bills and the Jets.
Yeah.
This is a really big, opening game. It's going to set the trend for that entire AFC East division. Is Rodgers going to come in and start dominating this division like he did his last one, or are the Bills and Josh Allen going to, sit him down and go, no, look, this is our division now. Just because you're coming over here and you got a few weapons doesn't mean you're going to get to walk in here and take it from us.
Yeah, that was one of the games that I actually had highlighted going into week one, pretty much for the exact same reason of you have currently the top dogs, which are the Bills in that division.
Hmm.
And they looked at it and going like, okay, Tom Brady left. This is our division to win now. We have to worry about Miami a little bit, but we don't have to worry about the Jets. We didn't have to worry about the Patriots. And now they're kind of sitting back going like, okay, Aaron Rodgers is coming in. The Jets have a defense. They have offense. The biggest issue last year for the Jets was their quarterback position, and now they casually just have a first ballot Hall of Famer. The day he retires, I think he should be introduced into Canton type of guy,
Yeah.
and so it's going to be a dogfight. And Aaron Rodgers seems to be kind of rejuvenated a little bit more than what I've seen from him in previous years. Because obviously going to the Packers the last pretty much since Jordan Love got there, it was one of those things where it was like he's coming in, he doesn't see, like obviously he's focused and he's prepared, but like how focused is he really type of
Well,
situation.
I mean, what it felt like was it was almost like after they drafted Jordan Love that he would come in there every year and go, okay, well, look, this is what we need to get back and win another Super Bowl. And the front office would look at him and go, yeah, no, that we're not going to do that. We're building for after you still,
Yeah.
and it just seemed to frustrate him. And then he goes to the Jets, and immediately they're like, "Oh, you want that guy? Okay, he's here. Oh, you want that? Okay, yeah, we'll sign him."
Yeah, and
And so he's
it's
sitting there going, "Oh my God, it's a front office that is listening to me and getting me the weapons that I desire, and then letting me work with these guys to build up, a good protective offensive line that's gonna understand what I plan to do." And we might see a reemergence of greatness from Aaron Rodgers.
I look at that and I go like Aaron Rodgers was very vocal. He's like, I would love for the Jets to go out there and sign Dalvin Cook. And the Jets, there's like everyone's sitting there going like, well, you already have Brees Hall. And he's like, yeah, I
Right?
get that, but to have two elite running backs, why not? And again, they got Dalvin Cook for, if I'm remembering correctly, relatively cheap. Like they didn't have to fork over $1 billion to get him to sign on to the actual team. I'll try to find the actual contract here, but again, it's one of those things where as I struggle to type and figure out. But yeah, it was a 1 year, $7 million deal for the Jets and Dalvin Cook. That's a great deal for this guy. And
Yeah.
to be able to look at it and go, okay, we have Brees Hall, and then we can also have Dalvin Cook. We can literally have these guys split drives and going, okay, well, they're the most healthy, they're the most refreshed, and to like that's going to be insane to try to stop that run game, and then to just that opens up so many passing lanes for Aaron Rodgers to casually use, which is not going to be a very fun thing for a lot of the AFC to try to deal with, especially in that division.
No, exactly. And I mean, who's to say the Jets are done at this point too? There's a couple of big names out there that, aren't necessarily happy where they are. And while the Jets don't have much for draft picks next year, they still have stuff available for the next couple of years that they could send some more first round picks away. I'm looking at Jonathan Taylor. That would still be an even further upgrade at that running back position. I've been watching a lot of it just because I know we're playing them in the first week. Nick Bosa, he's not signing that contract because he wants more money and the Niners aren't ready to give it to him. And so there's been some whispers here and there about, will he go somewhere else? And could you imagine Nick Bosa going and joining that Jets defense like that? I think would elevate them to the top team in that division immediately.
Well, another guy that has currently not actually suited up for his team at all, not even practice, and is arguably one of the best defenders in the NFL, might be looking for a trade, and that's Chris Jones.
Yep.
And that's one of those things where if you're the Jets, you look at the Chiefs, go, listen, we'll give you 2 first-round picks,
Hmm.
and we've seen with the Chiefs and this front office, if they can't come to terms with a player, I could very much see them going like, yeah, sure. And they've already sent a guy in Tyreek Hill to
Yep.
within the AFC, so why wouldn't they do it again? And we've seen them just continue to load up with these draft picks and going like, how do these guys have 2 first-round picks? They're already so good, and they can just constantly reload, and they can keep their salary to a reasonable level and sign some of these guys. And if Aaron Rodgers goes to a team, or if, pardon me, Chris Jones goes to a team like the Jets, they already
Hmm.
have Quinnen Williams there. Just imagine trying to stop that interior.
Yep.
It's insane. And that it's going to be a great game. Any other games that you were kind of looking at that's currently on the schedule that you're really interested to see?
No, I mean, week one, those were sort of the three big games I was looking at outside of, my own. A lot of the other games I feel are really looking one-sided for the most part. I'm interested to see the Jags play. I kind of want to see what Trevor Lawrence is going to do this year, but going up against the Colts without Jonathan Taylor, I imagine it's going to be an easy win.
And then also having a rookie quarterback who is
On
extraordinarily raw.
right, and like you want to see the Eagles and what they're going to look like because they just stacked their defense even further. But again,
They
going up
lost a
against the
ton of guys
Patriots,
as well, though, so they kind of had to
yeah,
stack their defense. But yeah, exactly
yeah,
to what you're saying is that they are kind of going up against the Patriots, who I think they also made a weird move, cutting a guy, Billy Zappa, who was like, we're all kind of
well,
sitting back going like, he was kind of your best quarterback last year. Again, that's
yeah.
not really saying much, but like hands up, going like, what are you guys doing? Like,
Well, even further than that, like we were talking about a team going with only two tight ends, like that they cut both their other quarterbacks. They're going into the season with one quarterback on the depth chart. That is it. Like in that week one game, if you know who is it there now?
Mac Jones.
Mac Jones. Like if he goes down, like what do you have? Who's going in? You gonna move Juju Smith-Schuster over to throw passes or what? Like you're absolutely screwed if that happens. Like it's just such a bizarre move for any team to go into a 53-man roster with only one quarterback.
So I am just looking just to confirm that they currently have what says on the roster they have 4 guys. It still says they have Billy Zappa on the roster, but they've also signed Matt Corral and Malik Cunningham. So they don't have just the one guy. And I think
Okay.
Matt Corral signing with the Patriots after that game, he was playing for Dallas is what who he was playing for, and he looked really really good. Had those 4 touchdowns. So they do have him coming in, but they also still say they have Billy Zappa. So I wonder if that just needs to be updated. But I know Matt Corral has signed with the Pats, so kind of being their backup. But
Oh,
yeah,
that one
just
makes sense too. I mean, he's got some experience with Bill Belichick as well.
yep. And it's just going to be really really interesting. And again, there's just a lot of these types of games this week. You look at the Texans going up against the Ravens, and you kind of look at it and go like, yeah, like Will Anderson is going to be a dog. He might get after Lamar, but this kind of just feels like the Ravens are just kind of walk over the Texans because they're still not that great. Then you have the Panthers versus Falcons, where you just kind of throw your hands up and you go, no one really knows what either of those teams are going to be, because they have, well, one has a rookie quarterback and one has essentially a rookie because he only started like
Hmm.
4 or 5 games last year. Then you have the
Which I mean, it makes it for an interesting game because I mean that being a divisional matchup there, like that could set the tone for what's to come for many years. Having Christian Ritter against Bryce Young, so
Yep, totally,
I
totally.
mean, it's going to be interesting to see, and who knows, maybe Kyle Pitts will finally be able to do something there.
I know my good buddy and fellow opponent in our fantasy football league, which is something that we will talk about a little bit later. He is really hopeful that Kyle Pitts has a resurgence because he drafted him.
Hmm.
I forget which round exactly it was, but he drafted him, and he is gonna be one of those guys where it's like, okay, like I really need you to do something. Please God,
Yep.
do something.
And I
And
mean, it is interesting those two games you mentioned as well. It's been a while since we've, outside of Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow. Usually there's one here and there, but to have two rookie quarterbacks being named the starters in Week 1 in C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young, it's going to be interesting to see if either of those guys can show any flashes or if they just get torn up. I mean, C.J. Stroud's going to have a tough time against that Ravens defense.
yeah, well, and not only that, we don't have just two quarterbacks named starter for week
Right?
one. We
Anthony
have three.
Richardson.
Anthony
Yep.
Richardson is there as well, and again, we talked about him. He's going to be going up against, as I'm looking here, that
Trevor
Jacksonville
Lawrence.
Jaguars
Yep.
defense. I don't think the Jags have a superstar caliber defense, but they're gonna make his life very, very tricky. And obviously they're gonna have to start throwing the ball a lot more because I just don't think the Colts defense is gonna be able to stop the Calvin Ridley, the Christian Kirk, and
Right.
Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence going out there, and the Doug Peterson just really just trying to dial everything up. They're gonna make Anthony Richardson's life very, very difficult out there, and
Hmm.
I know you
And
briefly talked about it, so.
that Jags defense is sneakily good, though. I mean, you got to remember that front seven is stacked, man. Like, there's a lot of good players on there that they don't necessarily put up the most stats, but they are good, solid players who they don't miss their mark.
No, no, that and you know what? That's fair. I think their front seven is a lot better than their secondary. I still think they need
Yes,
to
it
get
is.
a little bit better in there. And so with Anthony Richardson, if he can, find Paris Campbell, Paris Campbell, am I thinking of someone different here? But again, if he can find his wide receivers deep, not necessarily that much of a worry, and it's one of those things of going like, okay, you can potentially exploit. No, Michael Pittman. That's who I was thinking of.
Hmm.
And if you can find a guy like Michael Pittman who is very, very talented, it's not necessarily going to be such a bad thing to have.
Nope.
And another game that I think is going to be kind of interesting to watch is going to be the Titans versus Saints. Again, these two teams are kind of in a weird spot of where they could be good, like they could both be playoff teams, but they could both be very bad at some points this year. Like both
Yeah.
teams at the moment, like I know the Saints, they're definitely the clear-cut favorite to win that division. Obviously, Derek Carr, new starting quarterback, but is he going to be a new version of Derek Carr, or is it going to be poopy pants Derek Carr that we saw in Vegas and Oakland for a lot of years, where the second he
Hmm.
gets a hint of pressure, he's screaming like he's in a horror film, which
Oh,
is
definitely. And I mean, the ease of schedule for the Saints too plays into their hands. They've got a very easy schedule this year, probably the easiest in the NFL in reality.
it's without a doubt definitely up there without a shred of a doubt. But that's
Yeah.
going to be another game that I'm kind of keying in on. An AFC battle of former number or first round quarterbacks that were I think went back to back in Tua Tagovailoa and Justin Herbert when the Dolphins take on the Chargers. This is going to be an interesting game in my opinion, just because you're going to see if Tua can stay healthy, and
Yep.
the Chargers, this is going to kind of be one of those situations of going, we are not a pushover team. Like like this. I remember last year you and I talking. I said that the Chargers were ultimately going to win that division last year. That was my division winner in the AFC West, and they ultimately just kind of fell flat of that. And I think they thought that they were better than what they were last year, and this year I think they're ultimately going to attempt to have a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder and go like, listen, like we underperformed last year, and this is the time for us to take it to the next level. And so I think week one, and I know Justin Herbert doesn't really care. He's like, yeah, sure, I got drafted where I wanted to get drafted, blah 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 blah. But
And just
he
signed a big contract too, so
just signed a big contract, and for him, he's like, I just want to go out there and play ball. But you got to feel that little bit of or you got to have that feeling of like there's got to be that little bit of burn to go, you guys messed up by taking this guy in front of me. Like you could have had me.
I mean, yeah, like the tough thing too, though, like you look at that Chargers team last year, and Herbert doesn't really have much to prove. He was playing hurt for a few games, so his stats suffered there. But other than that, the offense was on point. They rolled week to week. The issue in LA there is that defense, that Chargers defense. You know, they were the ones that kept costing them games. You know,
They
because
and
Herbert would
coaching.
go out and right, like they would go out and they'd put up all these points, and then yeah, bonehead calls at the end of the game by the coach. You know, the defense giving up easy touchdowns at the end of the game. It just, you know, it's got to be frustrating for him, but at the same time, he's likely looking at it going, well, I mean, I'm doing my part. I can't go out there and play defense as well.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here to score points for you. You guys got to figure out a way to stop the other team.
So
And
now
that's going to be
just
tough against a team like Miami. You know, Tua, Tyreek Hill. Like, it's
well, don't forget
Hill.
Vic Fangio is also the
Yep.
defensive coordinator now, and Miami, like as you were talking about Jacksonville, they also have a sneaky good
Hmm.
defense. And with Vic Fangio, when he's a defensive coordinator, he works magic. Not
Yep.
necessarily the best head coach in the NFL. He's kind of one of those guys where it just kind of feels like he's always destined to be the coordinator, and he will always be one of the best coordinators in the NFL. And whenever he has a defense, and obviously Jalen Ramsey not going to be there for most of the year, which is unfortunate. But once you still get him, that defense could be kind of terrifying.
Yep.
And now taking a look here for maybe some of our more betting friendly fans, the three biggest advantages, obviously, number one is Houston versus Baltimore, where Baltimore is -10 over the Texans, and honestly, that doesn't shock me at all. 10-point advantage, winning that. I wouldn't be surprised if there's an even bigger win margin in that actual game. Then the next is the Cardinals versus the Commanders, with the Commanders holding a -7 over Arizona, which again, I don't. It doesn't really shock me that Arizona would be down -7, but the Commanders kind of have that team of where it's Sam Howell. We don't really know what the Commanders are gonna be, so that one kind of
Hmm.
feels a little interesting to me. And then the third biggest margin is week or game number one on Thursday, Detroit versus the Chiefs, where it is -6.5 for the Kansas City Chiefs. All
That surprised me a little bit. I would have thought that the Buccaneers at Vikings would have had a bigger margin than that.
Buccaneers at Vikings is next up on this with
Mm.
-6. So
Okay.
very, very close margins. And then the next after that is the Rams versus Seahawks. Seahawks come in with -5. Um, Funny enough, taking a look here at this list, the game with the closest margins, unfortunately, just happens to be my fucking game with
Hmm.
the Bears -1 over the Packers. So, um, luckily, I don't have any sharp objects around me at the moment. As I know in the last podcast, there was many threats upon my own health in a
Right.
video game. Um,
Are you remembering field goals? Is or missed field goals, perhaps? Because yeah, that -1 that tells me that that game might be decided on a last minute field goal, one way or the other.
See, earlier this week, you sent me a thing reminding me about that
Right.
famous field goal, and I'm surprised I didn't jump out of my two-story bedroom head
Right.
first into the pavement. Which is just kind of one of those things where I was like, ah, I love reliving this moment. No, no.
Right. Need to throw some field goal posts out there that'll help soften the fall.
I'm just trying to think of one situation that really screwed over the Steelers. And the first thought was, oh, it wasn't a catch. But I was like, no, that worked in the Steelers' advantage.
Yeah.
That's against the Raiders. There's a lot of it goes against the Raiders types of moments. Yeah, obviously, was it a catch? Wasn't it a catch? Was it a fumble? Was it the tuck rule? Even Tom Brady saying, nah, that was a fumble.
Yeah.
Years afterwards with him and Charles Woodson, the two Michigan men coming back from the team playing each other in that moment. Really
Yep.
funny moment between them. Um,
Yeah, but clearly the odds makers agree with us that that Packers Bears game is going to be one of the most competitive of week one.
yeah, fuck me. Not happy about that.
No, come on. I like competitive football. You gotta love it.
Yeah, but kind of like what
I'd
we were
much
talking.
rather be playing the Bengals or the Ravens in week one than in week 18 or 17,
Yeah,
you know?
and it is one of those things where if the Packers do beat the Bears and it's a really close competitive game, it's like, okay, it's week one. Who cares? You could lose your first 4 games of the year when everything else go win the Super Bowl. Doesn't matter. But
Right?
like every single time that I see Green Bay is up on the schedule for the next game, and it happens twice a year. You know this. Like I get a massive amount of anxiety because it's one of those things of just this demon has just been
Hmm.
attacking the team, and it's just one of those things where it's kind of become a hard pill to swallow, and just like fuck, I don't want to play these guys because. And
Right?
this is probably the most nervous that I've been because we don't have the Brett Favres, we don't have the Aaron
Hmm.
Rodgers, and it's kind of one of those things of going like, I and a lot of Bears fans are probably in the same boat of going like, please God, just don't let Jordan Love be good. We cannot have another situation of Jordan Love turning into a surefire Hall of Fame quarterback, MVP, goes wins. Like the Bears fans wouldn't be able to handle it.
No. No, and it's like the schedule makers were like looking at and going, how can we torture Bears fans the most? Okay, let's make them play the Packers in week one, and then let's make them play the Packers on the very last week of the season as well.
Yep.
Let's torture them as much as we possibly can. We're gonna make sure these guys don't want to live anymore.
Well, it's one of those things of like if like I'm more than fine dealing with like a week 18 matchup last game of the season. It's one of those things where it's going to be so much pressure, but for instance, let's say the Bears lose that one and they're not in the playoffs, like cool, whatever. Uh, but they really are just kind of going, they're sticking the knife in and they're twisting it and going, you like pain, don't you? And I'm just sitting back
Yeah.
going, yes, please, more. And it's going
Maybe,
to be
maybe that's what your defense needs to start doing and go, you know what? Take a page out of the AFC North and go, maybe we need to make this rivalry a little bit more violent. Because that's why I hate playing my rivals in those last 3 weeks of the season because inevitably, Ravens, Browns, Bengals, it's like, okay, somebody's going to get hurt. That was one of those games that completely changed Antonio Brown's life.
fuck, did it
Guy's head
ever.
taken off by perfect.
Yep.
It happens so many times. At least there's that level of, almost what it was. The Bears and the Packers, these hate each other, but you're nice to each other.
It's a
You know,
very gentleman, respectable rivalry of going back a
yeah,
hundred years. It's like, listen, it's kind of like brothers fighting, where it's like we
yeah,
love you, but I'm gonna fucking rip your head off. But we're gonna
right.
do it
Whereas,
respectably. And within your
exactly,
division, it's one of those things where it's going, I fucking hate you. I'm gonna kill you, and I don't care how I kill you. I'm gonna bury the body. I'm gonna piss on your grave. That is kind of the way your rivalry is. And like I hate that the rivalry that I have with the Packers is. And there's probably going to be people on both sides that go, it's not respectable. I'm like, listen, like, yeah, Aaron Rodgers yelling at Bears fans, going, I own you, and then weeks later he goes, I love playing at Soldier Field. It's one of my favorite places to play, not just because it's like I get that rivalry. It's because they're amazing fans and it's just a great atmosphere. And like you'll have that respect between each other. And yeah, uh, fuck, do I hate the Packers though? I like there's probably gonna have to be in my house sharp objects removed, a lot of padding around, and I'm sure you're gonna be watching that game, sending me messages and messages of going, oh, because you're gonna be poking the bear too. I know you will.
oh, for sure. I'm gonna be in Photoshop trying to make up some Jordan Love memes that I can send you or something.
Well, he already did say Happy Father's Day to all the Bears fans, so he
Did he?
knows who his daddy is, and that became a whole meme in itself. And but moving forward, yeah, not a ton of games. Obviously, a lot of college football happening here right now. One of the games that was very much looking forward to on the schedule was Colorado versus TCU. Deion Sanders, first time head coach with, or not first time head coach, but first time as the head coach of Colorado, going up against the team that was in the national championship game. Colorado currently winning 31 to 28 over TCU, so that is a big game right now. A few of the games that I'm watching, Michigan is currently dominating East Carolina 30 to nothing right now. Iowa versus Utah State 17 to 6. But the big game right now, Oklahoma over Arkansas State. Sterling, I want you to take a guess unless you've already looked at the score. What do you think the score is right now?
I mean, Sooners against Arkansas State. I'm betting it's somewhere in around 50 to maybe 3.
66 to nothing for Oklahoma.
That
And
wasn't
they
that
just
far off.
started and they just started the fourth.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. The Tennessee is currently taking it to Virginia 42 to 10. Old Miss over Mercer 28 to 7, and still a ton of games to look forward to later today. I'm really excited to see Ohio State versus Indiana, Rice versus Texas, uh, Georgia versus Tennessee Martin, just because I want to see what this Georgia team is going to look like after losing their starting quarterback and again just all of their defense. It seemed like USC versus Nevada. Again, just watching Caleb Williams likely going to be the Heisman Trophy winner again. Alabama versus Middle Tennessee. Yeah, they currently hold the favor of minus 40, which is likely going to hit. And yeah, man, I'm just so happy to have college football back. It is
Just have
such,
any football, right?
yeah, and we are Canadian, so yes, we do have Canadian football, but I know you and I, you are more of the Canadian football guy than I am, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the NFL and college football, I think both of us we're watching that over the CFL.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I, I, I used to use CFL as sort of like my preseason. I would watch CFL football until college football and NFL came back. I would still watch the CFL because, at least they're smart enough. They play their games on different days. It's usually Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that the CFL plays,
Yep.
with occasionally a Saturday or Sunday game. Um,
I always
and
find it
and even
funny when the CFL says we're gonna throw a Sunday night football game on when there's NFL currently also being played, and you're like, what you
I
thinking about that?
I mean, the only time I've really seen them do that is once it enters playoffs.
Fair.
It's more playoffs when they do that, and or they'll have a Monday games for like Labor Day,
Yep.
stuff like that,
Yep.
holidays. Beyond that, they don't really go up against the NFL too much because they know they're just not going to win the ratings battle.
Yep.
And especially in your own country when your own channels like TSN are choosing to put an NFL game on instead of a CFL game on, they know they don't have that star power. Um, but I mean, for me, as you know, the last couple of years, I I got rid of cable because I got tired of paying so much money just to watch sports. And with the shifts I work, most of the time I wasn't able to watch it live anyway. So I was like, you know what? Why bother? I'm still hoping one of these streaming services decides to, ante up and go, you know what? We've got soccer, we've got the NFL. Let's throw on some college football or let's throw in some CFL. But
Yeah.
hasn't happened to date, and I don't see it happening with the CFL. I'm much more hopeful it'll happen with college
College.
football.
The
Yeah.
big issue with college football is the whole conferences and that type of thing. The SEC, they have their own sports streaming network, and it's just it the whole conference thing, what's happening with college football right now with all the moves and stuff like this, it's really kind of getting out of hand, and it's almost kind of making it that like you have super divisions and then you just kind of have the divisions that no one else is really going to watch. And recently I saw a guy talk about kind of the best way to fix this whole scenario. I don't know if I talked to you about it, but it was one of those things where when I heard it, I was like, college football needs to do this, and it's to have a relegation and promotion
Mm-hmm.
type style. And what it
Yeah.
has is that it has its four top divisions. So your your Premier League, then your Champions League, then your League One, then your League Two, and then you have underneath that your East, West, North, and South. And essentially, what it is that your top 16 teams all play in the Premier, and the bottom four teams in that they get relegated, and then the top 12 teams, because I know we're going to a 12 team playoff, because right there that ultimately solves this top 14 play or this top 12 playoff. And
Mm-hmm.
same thing with the Champions League, and then League 1, League 2 all have 16 teams, all have a kind of playoff scenario in their own little leagues that way, so they can see who's going to get promoted and relegated. And similar thing where you could have the North, East, West, and South, all the winners of those divisions, just the winner itself, they all move into that tier 4, I guess, or League 2.
Yeah.
And I think it would be so much fun, because again, you would have these situations where you're not having an Alabama go up against Middle Tennessee. Like you're gonna have an Alabama going up against Georgia, then you're gonna have them going up against a USC and an Ohio State, and you're gonna have these games of where it's just gonna be the most exciting football week in week out, and then you're not gonna have these teams that are in the SEC that are just kind of like, yeah, we're here too. It's like, are you though?
I think you would still need to see some of the cross divisional games, especially early in the season, because some of those lower tier schools want to be able to test where they're at. Like how far do we still have to go before we're competitive with these other teams? And then the top of the top always want a nice ease into it to start the season. So I think you would still have to see that. But it's funny because it's been well over a decade since the last time I bought and played an NCAA game, because they don't make them anymore. I know that's coming back, but I remember NCAA 12. That was how I ran my franchise modes. Is I would start it and I would put the top teams into a division and I would trickle it down to the worst teams being in individual conferences. And from there, I would do the same thing, relegation and promotion. Every year I would go through and look at the schedules and the standings and be like, okay, you get to move up, you're going down, you move up, you're down. So it's funny that somebody had mentioned doing that now, because I think that is exactly how it should be.
Yeah, and funny enough, I'm currently playing NCAA 14 because for the first time, I think since '06, I haven't bought a Madden game, and I need my football fix. I need it. So
Good boy.
I always go back to NCAA 14 every year. You know me. There'll be a time like, oh hey, what are you doing tonight? I was like, oh I'm 3 seasons deep into my NCAA franchise, and so I started up a new one, and that's kind of how I was doing this division, and it makes it so much more fun, man. Like
Right?
just because I'm
And
sitting back going like, okay, like I know I was here last year, and now I'm kind of in this division where I don't think I really should be, because we kind of got shit ass lucky, and now I'm playing
Mhm.
these teams and it's so much more difficult, and holy god is it so much fun.
Right? And honestly, like I know EA is making a new college game, but I really wish they wouldn't. I would rather they just go back and look at something like NCAA 14 and just be like, you know what? We're just gonna remaster it. We're gonna clean it up and we're gonna re-release it for $10.
Well, that's kind
I
of what
wish
I'm
they would just
hoping this new NCAA game is. It's going like, listen, we are
football.
literally not changing anything. We're just adding the updated graphics. There you go. I would pay $60 for that. I would. I really
Yeah.
would. To just go, give me
Yeah, as
the
long as they don't
latest
mess
updated
with anything.
graphics.
But the problem with them is they're going to mess with all the other settings throughout. That's where the problem is going to come into
Yeah.
play.
The only reason I
'Cause
actually
I
have
would.
hope for this game is because it has been in development for like 6 years, as opposed to Madden, of where it's, development for about 6 or 7 months, and then it's kind of like that's kind of what they're at. So that's why I have a little bit more hope for the NCAA game, because it's just been in development for so long that at least there hopefully shouldn't be. Hopefully the bugs are more ironed out.
I mean, hopefully, but like I mean, I hate to burst your bubble, but I doubt it. Like, I feel like it's only been in development for so long because they keep running into roadblocks with branding and with naming and stuff like that. And then just every year they're like, oh, okay, well, now we have to, tweak it for this year, and so it's just in the same cycle as Madden, except they're not releasing it, is what I feel like it truly is because it's not like they're going to use a different engine. They're not going to use anything special or unique that they don't use in Madden. And it's EA. They're going to copy and paste as much as they possibly can and then just add random generators in.
Yeah, I have to have hope. We have to have hope for this one. And again, my hope is just solely of if we can get a college football game back and it's been in development, hopefully when they see it's like we hit these roadblocks while we're still
Mm-hmm.
working on this game, because I know they have their own team dedicated to it. So it's one of those things of going, okay, well, we have all this time. Let's just make this as best as possible. And
Mm. It's just EA that I have trouble having faith in, honestly.
true,
My
which
my hope is that millions more take the cue from you finally and stop buying Madden so that EA is either forced to actually upgrade their game and do a good job, or the NFL looks at it and goes, this isn't worth the revenue anymore because we're now losing fans. So we're going to open up the license to other companies. That is my hope because, you know me. I haven't bought a Madden in
I think the last one you had is
almost
20, Madden
well, the
20.
last one I bought at release, I think, was 18 or 19.
Mm,
I have bought some since then, but only when they're on sale for under $10.
yeah,
Yeah.
fair.
And it's like, well, that's just because, like you going back to college, I need my fix, my franchise fix. And unfortunately, they don't really remaster games like that, so you can go back and grab an NCAA 12 or 14 or anything like that.
Yeah. Now kind of getting over into a little bit more of our fantasy talk or fantasy football talk, not our fantasy talk. That's a whole different podcast and a
Yeah,
lot.
that is not acceptable for children, that podcast.
It's not acceptable for most people's ears, to be perfectly blunt and honest with
Yeah.
you in that regard. But again, just kind of going through it. One IQ, we have a six-man fantasy football draft that happened last week. The full draft is going to be put up on Sunday. We're recording this on Saturday, going to be up the following day afterwards. Lot of really interesting stuff. Myself and you were both in it. Both DJ and Will from our baseball podcast are in this as well, and then two of our hockey podcast guys who are going to be joining the team here relatively shortly. Colton, which is the guy that I brought up, and Taryn Jote, they were all in this one. So kind of taking a look at this, the way that I kind of set the draft order here, because it would have kind of felt cheap if I said, oh, you and I are going to have the first two overall picks because we're the football guys. So I was like, no, we can't do that. That's going to look really bad on us. So I used a spinner wheel to ultimately decide. Will, who ended up getting the sixth overall pick, I know he was not super jazzed about that. He's going, well, that's kind of annoying. Hopefully one of you fuckers don't get it. You ended up with the fifth pick. I ended up with the fourth pick. Colton with the third. DJ with the second. And Taryn Jote with the first overall pick. And when Taryn Jote found out that he had the first overall pick, he was hyped because he is a football fan, but he's more of a hockey guy. And yeah, Sterling, with your giggles here, take it away,
Oh.
buddy. Tell us what happened with the first overall pick. And again, you are going to see this played out live when the full video gets released, likely tomorrow. But needless to say, with the first overall pick, we were shocked.
Yeah, we were shocked beyond that because it wasn't just the first overall pick. Those first three picks sort of threw us for a loop because you and I picking at 4 and 5 after we talked about, oh, we can't just give ourselves the 1 and 2 pick. We still, in my opinion, arguably ended up with the number 1 and the number 2 guy in that draft, which was Justin Jefferson and Christian McCaffrey. Because
So
for some reason, number 1 overall, he decided in his infinite wisdom to do the ultimate donkey play, and he picked Patrick Mahomes, number
Well,
1 overall.
after talking with him more, he was late to show up to the draft. And so he had Patrick Mahomes in his queue, like we all did. We all added players to our queue, and he didn't get there in time, and he
But
auto drafted Patrick Mahomes.
but I mean, like we've all done fantasy drafts before, or most of us have. I don't know if there was a rookie in there or not.
Oh yeah, we had
Or,
3 rookies.
okay, fair. Okay, so then I will cut them some slack because I know for myself when I'm building my queue, I don't start at the quarterbacks.
No.
I build my queue wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Because that way, if something happens, your internet goes down, you can't log in time and you miss it. At least that first pick you take is somebody that
You
genuinely
want.
should be taken there.
Yeah.
Like I don't know anybody that would queue up Patrick Mahomes to be number 1 no matter what. Even if you're like, oh well, I definitely want to queue him as my quarterback, but I'm gonna slide him down underneath Justin Jefferson at the very least, just in case I get the first overall pick.
Without a doubt, and spoil the first round. So Taron Joe, his team name is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I thought was quite funny, taking the spin on Jack Smith and Jigba. And then with pick number 2, this is DJ. His team name is Manziel's Drug Dealer, which I thought was decently creative especially with the documentary coming out. He
Yeah,
took Jamar Chase, which great pick at number 2. That is where he should be.
yeah. I mean, I had Jamar Chase more sitting at that 3-4 spot myself.
Fair. I personally I would have taken if I had the number 2 pick and Justin Jefferson was gone, I was likely gonna take Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
But so I looked at it, I was like, yeah, great pick by DJ. The only issue is Jamar Chase still on the board. And Colton, who was at number 3, his team name is CD's Nuts, play off the name of CD Lamb. Um, he told me before the draft, he said, I'm going to have to struggle between Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey. He said to me, he goes, I hope Eckler and McCaffrey both go 1-2, so my choice is really easy.
Yeah.
And both guys still on the board. He ends up going with Austin Eckler, which I'm sitting back going like, and I'm pretty sure you and I were at the same moment of going like, there's no fucking way Justin Jefferson gets to me. To me.
Right? Right? All the way down to number 4. I mean, I knew once that happened, I knew there was no chance he was falling to me.
No.
Because there's no chance you're passing up on him. Because as we discussed, like, he's the de facto number 1.
Yep.
He should be going number 1 in basically every draft, unless you're a fanboy going for your guy.
It's one of those things that, yeah, exactly kind of what you're saying of like, oh, you're a San Francisco 49ers fan. You're like, I'm taking Christian McCaffrey. He's my guy.
Yeah.
And then obviously at this point, you kind of looked at it and went like, well, I have Christian McCaffrey here, so my pick is kind of easy for me to ultimately go out and take. So, yeah, like,
Right? That as soon as I saw Eckler go off the board at 3, I knew exactly who I was taking at
yeah,
number 5 because I knew who you were going to take it for. I was like, this is perfect because as I said when we started this, in my opinion, the 1-2 in this draft was Justin Jefferson, Christian McCaffrey, followed then by Jamar Chase, Austin Eckler.
yeah, and uh, like, the fact that we got the guys that we got in that first round, we're both kind of sitting here. And my team names is the Bare Necessities, obviously going back to that old Jungle Book,
Yeah.
theme song, and then yours is please announce.
I went with, South Park, but I had to change it up because I had a feeling you were anticipating me naming it like Tegrity Farms or something like I've been doing a lot lately. So I went with, I said, Wat in the butt.
Yep,
You know,
obviously the play on the names
paying
of.
homage to your boy Butters.
Yeah. And then Will, who is our resident Seahawks fan, he went with Slippery Seahawks, which I think we can all agree was probably number 6 on the creativity for fantasy name. He ended up getting Tyreek Hill, which I thought was a great pick. I was kind of a little annoyed that he selected Tyreek Hill because I was really hoping he was going to fall to me with my pick in the second. I don't know if you would have allowed me to do that.
I wouldn't have, because
Yeah.
that's what I was looking at for my second pick. Because
Yeah.
with how the first round went, I was like, this is an outside the realm possibility now. Tyreek Hill might fall that far because some of these guys are making some weird picks in some weird orders.
Yeah. Um, First pick in the second round really sent us for a shocker. Will obviously being 6, we had a snake draft. So if you don't know, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it goes 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we kind of go back in that type of order. If you've never done a snake draft type of a situation, but so after Will selected Tyreek Hill, he ultimately decides to go out and draft Josh Allen with the first pick in the second, and you and I just kind of looked at each other and went, "What the fuck is
I
happening?"
I I think the whole Discord chat at that point kind of erupted because we were like, a quarterback went first in both rounds to start this draft. Like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah, it was genuinely nuts to think about, and the even crazier thing to think at this point is the first 4 rounds of the draft, there was a quarterback taken in each of those rounds, and
Was it
ultimately,
was it just the first four, or did we
yes.
did we not have one taken in the fifth round?
No, we didn't have one taken in either the fifth or the sixth, and then we had two in
Okay.
the seventh, and yeah, so
Okay.
but yeah, pretty much at that point, everyone had had their starting quarterback that they ultimately went after, and you were one of the guys who ultimately ended up taking a quarterback, and you ended
Hmm.
up going with Joe Burrow in the fourth, which I think is good value for me. I looked at Patrick Mahomes and I said, if he is still there in the third,
Yeah.
which I ultimately thought he probably would have been because you're kind of taking a look at some of these guys. That was my ultimate plan to go, okay, third round, I'm going to just kind of look at everyone and go, hey, I know I'm going to be that asshole to start the quarterback train a little bit early, but I'm taking Mahomes here. He's too
Hmm.
valuable, and I have too much knowledge about a lot of kind of my sleeper guys that I ended up getting, and that got ruined really quickly. And
See, and that was my thought too. Like, I usually don't look at a quarterback until, round 5 or 6 or so, because I expect, the big names, the Mahomes and the Allen, to go in round maybe 3 or 4. And then at that point I can go, okay, now round 5 I can sneak in and grab someone like a Joe Burrow. But when we saw, a guy go off in first round and then another one in the second and then a third in the third round, I was like, I can't wait till round 5 for Joe Burrow because somebody's going to snap him up at this
yeah,
point.
yep.
So I had to take him in that fourth round.
And to be honest with you, I was likely probably going to take Joe Burrow either in the fourth or the fifth. And going back to our Madden days when we do our connected franchise, which is something that you and I haven't done in a hot minute, just unfortunately work lives and other shit along that lines.
Hmm.
The us being paired together right before each other, which was something that we would always have happen in our drafts for our connected franchise mode of going, and even you and I discussed this beforehand of like, oh hey, if there's just a guy that you really want, tell me a reason I should let you have him. And of course we had those kind of little joking moments of going like, yeah, so who you thinking right now? Like, hey, fuck off.
Right?
Well, and it was funny the entire time. Like, I was asking Will, I was like, you're behind me. So like, who you thinking for your pick? He goes, I can't tell you. I can't tell you. It's like, okay, well, you're behind me, so it's not like I can really dictate. Like, the guy that I'm gonna choose is probably a guy that you are gonna want, but like, who are you thinking? And even then, unfortunately, with whenever we're on the odd or the pardon me, the even rounds, so 2 4, I would always be a pick behind you. So I'm always looking at going like, this motherfucker is guaranteed to try to look at me at one moment and just be like, I'm gonna just take this guy because I know you want him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
funny
think
enough,
you might have got a little lucky this year just because I was so busy at work. I didn't have time to do much for mock drafts or much for research. And so I was sort of flying by the seat of my pants.
Yep.
which I think is probably why you got lucky and I didn't manage to rob you of anybody outside of maybe Joe Burrow, because I know after Mahomes went, that was probably the quarterback you were looking at.
Well, for me, I kind of looked at the way that it was going. I said Mahomes, um, Burrow. I was kind of sitting there going like, okay, well, once a quarterback is taken, and honestly, I was really banking on the fact that Mahomes was going to be there in the third. So, I
Weren't we
ultimately
all?
was kind of ill prepared for like what to really do at quarterback. My ultimately I'll tell you what my ultimate plan for quarterback situation was. Is I was hoping Mahomes was going to be there in the third. I was going to take him, and then later down the line, I was hoping that Justin Fields was going to kind of be slept on and take him and just kind of go like, hey, I can potentially use this as maybe a little bit of trade bait. Obviously, when Mahomes goes on his bye week, I can kind of do that, and that was kind of my quarterback plan. And
Yeah.
ultimately that kind of got disrupted rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4. So by the time that I ended up taking a quarterback, which was all the way in the seventh, and the fact that I got Lamar Jackson in all the chaos, oh, I kind of looked at that and I went, okay, like yeah, this is fine. Like I'm not
Yeah.
gonna say no to Lamar Jackson, one of the best fantasy quarterbacks, you know. And then ultimately my backup quarterback just so happens to be Justin Herbert. So if Lamar Jackson ends up going down, I have a great number two. And another one of the things we should specify, all of our teams are pretty stacked just because it is only a 6-man league. And when you do only have 6 men, like every team you just look at and it's just like, okay, it's just dog after dog after dog after dog, and you're just like, holy shit, how did you get that team? Was everyone just really bad? It's like, no, everyone kind of has teams like this.
Right. Yeah, and that's just it. That's what makes it interesting. And each team sort of has like one or two guys that were taken a little earlier than they should have been or could have been, simply because, we each have our own preferences and our own thoughts of who might be a breakout this year.
Yeah, without a doubt. And there's guys that you look at that I look at differently. We kind of have a bunch of those situations for sure. But yeah, it was a very interesting fantasy draft type of year. I'm happy we got the boys together to go do this. I think we're attempting to do a fantasy hockey draft. I don't know if that's something that you would ever be interested in doing or not. Would that be?
I I mean that's possible. That's definitely not something that I'm putting my name up there for. If I finish last place, I'm doing no freaking punishments for, because that's one I'm definitely losing.
Well, we
Because it's been
also,
probably 3 years since I've watched hockey, simply because no cable.
yeah, and we're still looking for a last place punishment for our league. Obviously, because it was a there wasn't a buy-in for it, so we're still kind of looking for that last place punishment. We've had a few funny suggestions come through the pipeline. There's one suggestion that you and I talked about that we can't mention on the broadcast because it, again, kind of going back to our fantasy talk,
Yeah.
not very much not appropriate. But yeah, so if you see this and you have any funny suggestions for a fantasy punishment or a last place fantasy punishment, the one that I kind of like the most so far is that the loser of the league has to book a 10-minute stand-up comedy routine. I think that would be really, really funny to have someone go up and do, which,
Yeah.
most of us, or well, actually, 5 out of the 6 of us are all broadcast majors. You being the lone individual who hasn't. So theoretically, the 5 of us should be able to go up there and do it no problem because we're all broadcast majors anyways. But yeah, the few people were kind of like, no, I don't really want to do that because I would probably die. And I'm
Right.
sure I'm sure you and I would be a okay with it. We're just goofballs.
Yeah, I've taken public speaking courses and all that sort of stuff through some post secondary and things. So
No.
I'm quite comfortable with that. I mean, I used to give the pre-shift meetings at work all the time as well, and that's, a good 100 people. So
Yep.
a little comedy club with 40 people, it's doable.
Oh,
For
totally.
for me, it's not so much the nerves being up there, it's more coming up with content that would be relatable enough to not get booed off the stage.
True. True. True.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of excitement going to be happening here in the football world over the coming weeks. We are on the eve, what seems like, of NFL truly being back, because obviously we had the preseason, and you and I and have a lot of thoughts about the actual preseason itself, but it is now officially over. The fat lady is about to start singing, and so we're getting really close to that. But at this moment, not a lot left. But one thing I do want to take a look at here is our top 5 power rankings heading into the actual regular season itself. So ultimately, who do we think the top 5 best teams are in the NFL right now? And I'm going to go out on another little limb here and say, what do we think the bottom 5 teams are this year as well? So Sterling, let's obviously start with our power ranking for our top 5. Taking a look here, do you need a moment, or do you think you kind of got a team more or less, or a board more or less kind of figured out here?
I've got a board more or less figured out here. Honestly, it's just my number 5 that's sort of the question mark. So, I mean, we'll start at 5. I would say for my power rankings right now, number 5 sitting. Oh man, that's tough. Yeah, number 5 right now would have to be the Ravens. And then coming in at number 4, I have the Buffalo Bills. Number 3, Cincinnati Bengals. Number 2, the Philadelphia Eagles. And number 1, the obvious Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I feel like you and I are going to have the exact same number 1 in this circumstance. But for me, my number 5 team is actually going to be the San Francisco 49ers.
Oh, I forgot about the 49ers. That's who I was missing.
Yeah. Then I'm going to. No, actually, I'm going to swap it here. I'm going to say the Buffalo Bills are my number 5 team. The 49ers are my number 3 team. I'm going to
Okay.
say the Bengals are 3, the Eagles at 2, and the Chiefs at 1. Those are kind of the teams that at the moment that I'm really taking a look at and going like, okay, here we go. So
And honestly, I completely forgot about the 49ers, so I would likely swap that as well. The Ravens would be out of there and the Niners would be at 4. So
yeah,
our,
so
our
pretty
power
much
5 are exactly the same.
the only difference is that you have the Bills at 4, I have them at 5.
But no, I would swap that because, like I said, me forgetting the 49ers, I would move them all the way to 4 and the Bills down to 5.
Okay, so yeah, you and I have
Yeah,
the exact same.
it
So Chiefs
yeah,
at
it is
1,
identical.
Eagles at 2, Bengals 3, 49ers 4,
Yeah.
and then we have the Buffalo Bills at number 5. Now going to our bottom 5 teams here. So starting with the 5th team that we think is probably going to likely be near the bottom of the league this year. Sterling, do you need a moment, or should I lead us off in this occasion?
Yeah, you should lead us off because, like, I've got an opinion of who's going to be last, but the others I'm not 100% on here.
Yeah, so for me at the moment, I'm likely going to say the Washington Commanders are going to be my 5th spot. Then I'm going to say that the Indianapolis Colts are going to be 4. The Houston Texans are going to be number 3. Actually, wait, no. So did I say the Cardinals?
You did not.
Okay, so I'm already gonna reorganize this. Just because yeah, I'm just kind of thinking this one over. So I'm going to say that the Indianapolis Colts are 5. The Who the hell did I already say? I got
Colts and Texans are the
Colts
two
and
you've said.
yeah. So the Colts are 5. The Texans are gonna be at my 3rd spot. I think the Commanders. You know what? I'll actually put the Commanders, the Colts, the Cardinals, Texans, and the Buccaneers.
Okay. Ultimately, I have the same 5 teams, just a slightly different order. I have the Commanders, then the Texans, then the Colts, then the Buccaneers, and the Cardinals finishing dead last.
Very, very fair. So if we don't have any other stuff to talk about, Sterling. I don't know if you have anything more.
Well, I feel like since we won't be back until likely next Saturday, and we will have the start of week one beginning, we probably should make at the very least our picks for who we think is going to win in week one Thursday night football. And then next Saturday we will go through the remainder of the games and make our picks for who we think is going to win.
Yeah, that's very fair. Um, I think you and I, this is probably going to be pretty easy. I think we're both
Yeah.
going to pick the Kansas City Chiefs, but maybe throwing a little bit more of a wrinkle into the situation. What do you think is likely going to be the closest score line in this game?
I think this is going to be a closer game than what some are thinking. Surprisingly, I had several people at work this week with the fantasy pool that they run at work that were picking the Lions to win this, which was just mind blowing to me. So I'm like, if it was a Ford Field, then sure, I could see a chance. There'd be a chance. But this is at Arrowhead. The Chiefs coming off a Super Bowl. Like, there's no way the Lions are winning this. Um, I don't know if the Chiefs will be quite as explosive as they normally are here in Week One. So I think the final score we're probably looking at somewhere around 27-24 in favor of the Chiefs.
So funny enough, I also have the Chiefs getting 27, but I actually have the Lions getting 17. So a pair of touchdowns and a field goal,
Yeah.
ultimately. But yeah, so very very close in that regard. I think the Lions defense is going to be fairly decent, but again, this is Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid with Travis Kelce out there. I think they're
hmm
weapons that they have this year are going to be a little bit more experienced, a little bit better than kind of what they had ultimately last year, and that really didn't even seem to affect them all that much. So yeah,
No,
that
but I do think the Lions are going to look better this year.
oh
You,
I
you
do
got
I
to
do
remember they
too.
got some good weapons. You got Amon-Ra St. Brown there, Jameer Gibbs they just drafted. They have David Montgomery now, who I think is going to be taking the bulk of their red zone snaps, especially when they're inside the 10. So it's going to be interesting watching this team. Jared Goff is looking to prove that he wasn't just a one-hit wonder in LA when he went to the Super Bowl, and he's been doing some good work in Detroit. I think we're going to see a decent Detroit team finally this year.
Yay.
Yeah, you're not too happy about it. I mean, you got to it's better than a good Packers team, right? Right?
True, true. It's just I always love having the Lions in my division because we knew it was an easy win, and it's like
That's
it's the Lions. Like it's kind of like
right.
you with the Browns, where it's like it's always nice to have that like essentially like baby brother that everyone else just kind of beats up and picks on. Just like yeah, like we'll let him play in the corner and do his own thing, but it's not really a threat to either of our teams or anything of that
hmm
sort. But yeah, that is likely going to do it for this episode. Make sure to tune in and hang out with us every single week. We have baseball and football, hockey likely to start up relatively soon here as the hockey world and hockey season gets close to going off. Make sure to like and subscribe and also comment on any other content that you'd like to see. And make sure to check out some of the extra videos and extra content also coming out in the regards of our fantasy draft as well. But Brendon, Sterling, peace.